Once upon a time, many years ago, there was an emperor so exceedingly fond of new clothes that he spent all his money on being well dressed.
En dag kom der 2 bedragere til byen.
Those would be just the clothes for me, thought the emperor. And he paid the 2 swindlers a large sum of money to start work at once.
Hele natten sad bedragerne oppe. Se, nu er klæderne færdige, sagde de.
Then the emperor himself came with his noblest noblemen to view these imaginary clothes. They all said, "How well your majesty's new clothes look. Aren't they so becoming?"
Så gik kejseren i procession. Ingen ville lade sig mærke med, at han intet så, for så ville han jo ikke have duet i sit embede, eller have været meget dum.
And in the middle of the procession, a little child said, "But he hasn't got anything on." "Did you ever hear such innocent prattle?" said its father. But then one person whispered to another what the child had said, repeating it over and over. "He hasn't anything on." A child said, "He hasn't anything on."
Men han har jo ikke noget på, råbte til sidst hele folket.
"But he hasn't got anything on," the whole town cried out at last.
This was H.C. Andersen, H.C. Andersen's Tale of the Emperor and His New Clothes, originally published April 7, 1837. This tale is about the enduring ideal of the power of the truth, as self-evident and revelatory, and the power of the truth-teller himself.
We're the highest taxed nation in the world.
Bullshit!
Vi finder en god løsning i morgen. Vi finder en god løsning i morgen. Vi finder en god løsning i morgen.
Sludder og vrøvl.
In 1899, Henrik Ibsen, at the inauguration of this very theater we sit in today, staged his play, An Enemy of the People. It also was about the power of the truth.
I move that the chairman rule the speaker out of order.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Out of order.
Out of order.
Then I'll shout the truth on every street corner, and I'll write to all the other newspapers. I'll see that the whole country gets to know what's going on here.
Det lader næsten til, at doktoren har til hensigt at ødelægge byen.
I love this town so much that I'd rather destroy it than see it prosper on a lie.
Den mand må være en borgerfjende, som kan ville ødelægge et helt samfund.
When a place has become riddled with lies, who cares if it's destroyed? I say it should be razed to the ground.
That's the talk of an enemy of the people.
Ibsen had a different take on the power of truth. Unlike Andersen, Ibsen suggested that those who spoke the truth would not be acknowledged and celebrated like the little child, but instead be reviled, exiled, and left alone.
Acknowledged or repressed, celebrated or reviled, embraced or isolated, both Andersen and Ibsen believed passionately in the power of the truth.
People in this country have had enough of experts.
Pisspreik!
The concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make U.S. manufacturing non-competitive.
Bullshit!
But, Steve, can we say bullshit?
Yes, because we're going to
You
put it
sure?
into an academic context.
Ah,
And what we're referring to here, when we talk about bullshit, is in agreement with Ludwig Wittgenstein's idea of an insidious, disruptive form of nonsense. You see, the liar's craft is falsity. Like the truth teller, she is guided by the authority of the truth. So the liar and the truth teller play in the opposite sides of the same game. The art of the bullshitter, on the other hand, is the bluff. He is faking it. He makes up the facts to fit his own reality. This is why Harry Frankfurt, a professor of philosophy and the author of the book On Bullshit, concludes that the bullshitter is a greater enemy to the truth than the liar, as the bullshitter pays no attention to truth whatsoever.
So I guess we live in an age of bullshit. Truth doesn't matter. We live in what The Economist magazine has called the post-factual society.
Yet at the same time, we live in the age of the fact check. A study conducted by the American Press Institute found that the number of fact-checking stories tripled between 2008 and 2012, and that 8 in 10 Americans view political fact-checking favorably, but only insofar as the facts conform their point of view.
So what works when facts don't? Well, it seems to us that story does. And for example, Donald Trump's story is that the mass media and the academics are liberal liars. So, well, here we are. The new paradigm is that of, in Danish, overskrifter og underholdning, headlines and entertainment. Here is Harry Frankfurt on bullshit again. Let me quote. The mode of creativity upon which it relies is less analytical and less deliberative than that which is mobilized in lying. It is more expansive and independent, with more spacious opportunities for improvisation, color, and imaginative play. This is less a matter of craft than that of art.
Now, this could be reason for despair. Democracy, after all, is based on the ideal of a rational public with full access to the facts. This is our Enlightenment legacy. This is the ideal that Anderson and Ibsen have held up. And this is the ideal that is drowning in bullshit. But there's also hope. For sprouting up in this new and fertile political terrain are new forms of democratic activism that get past bullshit with the use of art, appealing to the desire for story, spectacle, and emotional pull that the bullshitter does, but doing it in order to counter bullshit. It's useful to remember that while Ibsen and Anderson held up the truth as an ideal, they didn't make their arguments through facts alone, but through the art form of stories and plays.
Right.
It's not that the facts and truth don't matter. It's that the truth needs help.
Right.
So, we're going to break this for a second and do a little question to you all. We're assuming that everyone in this audience is interested in challenging and changing the world in some form or another, through law, through activism, through art, through policy, what have you. Is that a safe assumption? Safe enough.
I think it is.
Okay, so the question is this. What made you get engaged in the first place? What is the thing that had you step off the curb of indifference into some sort of participation, however you want to define that? So think of that moment. Really think of that moment. This is the participation. Hold it in your mind. What was the moment in which you decided to become engaged with the world? To not become a passive spectator, but to challenge it, transform it, what have you. Just go back to that place for a minute. Does that make sense? Okay. All right.
So, if you've thought of that moment, then the question is, was it one of these moments? Then do raise your hands. Was it, for example, listening to someone on a soapbox trying to get you engaged? Anyone? No? Was it maybe someone coming up to you with a petition or soliciting a donation, as we see here? No?
It's
Okay.
kind of depressing.
Was it someone coming up to you with was it someone handing you a pamphlet? Maybe.
Maybe a pamphlet in very small type with lots of facts on it.
There was one.
Okay, one. That's good. That's good.
Or
getting
maybe
better.
reading a white paper.
Come on, the white paper.
We all love the white paper. Okay, maybe finally receiving or forwarding a tweet. Anyone? Steve.
We'll even put in an email to that. So, okay.
No.
No. Okay, so we got to change things up a little bit here. That didn't work. Okay, so I want you to go back to that moment. And we're going to ask a different series of questions. And you don't have to be public about this. But was it something personal? Was it something emotional? Was it something experiential? Was it perhaps not even a moment at all, or something that's very hard to put into words and share? Was it actually something akin to the power that art has? The fact that we do not become politically engaged through appeals to reason, rationality, 10-point type, white papers, petitions, but instead through highly charged affective experiences, is bad news for traditional fact-revealing, truth-telling activists. But it's actually quite good news for a new form, and actually a very old form of activism,
Right.
which is,
Well, that is artistic activism, we call it. So that includes invisible theater, Trojan horses, prefigurative interventions, guerrilla projections, etc. But it also includes minor additions and twists to the already known and traditional repertoire of contention, including the demonstration, the sit-in, the strikes, the barricades, the lobbyists, etc. So when the creative activist is successful, she is able to use what Gene Sharp called political jiu-jitsu techniques in order to formulate an imminent critique of, say, communism or capitalism. It could also be her ability to provoke reflection through surprising interventions, or to facilitate co-creative participation by changing the rules of the game instead of blaming the players, to create an alternative space for utopian shadowboxing. So the artistic activist can be a dreamer, a clown, a therapist, a warrior, or, Steve, even a
coal mine-
lifesaver, right?
I was going to say a coal mine canary.
Okay, I left that out actually.
I know. Exactly. Even a coal mine canary. Because artistic activism is a hybrid practice that combines the affective qualities of art with the effective capabilities of activism. So Silas and I like to kind of create new words. We're academics. And so we've come up with phrases like affective effect. And if you don't like that, just effective affect. And then actually, to really sort of prove that we are academics, creating new fields, we created our own word, which is the combination of the two. Affect, which is not to be confused with effect, but
Right.
is effect.
But that's the same thing.
No, it's
But-
different. Wait,
No,
this is effect, this is effect.
Okay, but listen, this is a Danish word, actually. So, as a Scandinavian, let me pronounce it correctly. It's effect.
All right.
But anyways, that's how it's pronounced.
Effect. Okay, I'm going to work on that. Okay.
Effect.
One of the masters of this mobilization of effect
Effect.
are our friends, the Yes Men, which probably many of you are familiar with. The Yes Men
Right.
are masters at performing a lie to get at the truth, revealing a lie which masquerades as a truth, demonstrating a more profound truth, yet as brilliant and creative and funny as they are, and they are. This type of artistic activist intervention is still staged within the binary realm of truth and false, facts and lies.
Another activist model that we would like to point to actually goes beyond performing truth or falsehood. It actually performs services, actions of the state, coming up with concrete but still critical and creative solutions to some of the societal problems as what Sidney Terrell calls strangers at the gates. Well, maybe not quite so strange anymore.
No bullshit?
right? No bullshit.
All right. But collaboration with the state, I'm not sure about that, Silas.
Well, I'm not sure either, but that's what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Okay, collaboration with the state. Here's a 1 minute on the welfare state. So after the Second World War, the Nordic welfare states were developed. And our baby was named in 1953. Through the 1960s, it developed with tremendous growth. But in 1975, we have had an economic crisis, and the Trilateral Commission came out with its conclusions. The bureaucracy of the welfare state had grown out of proportions, and it wasn't able to live up to the high and bloated expectations of its citizens. So, what was the result?
Thatcher and Reagan.
Right. The result was also streamlining and deregulations.
Hello, new public management.
Hello. But today, we have moved from the welfare state to what Professor Ove Kaj Pedersen calls the competitive state. This also means that we have moved from a moral state to an economic state, that we have moved to a state with a focus on what is good, to a state that focuses on what is effective. It also means that the political culture itself has become a competitive factor. So, to solve so-called wicked problems in today's complex and increasingly globalized world, we need a variety of actors on different levels to co-create new solutions to the challenges that we are facing today.
For example?
Well, for example, participatory budgeting, which is one example of the democratic value of this approach. But it could also be the new Danish party, the Alternatives Political Laboratories, which is an example of how the development of policy itself can be crowdsourced. Now, these approaches are definitely steps in the right direction. But, and there is a but here, although the interaction patterns have changed, the involved agents are still old favorites, and deliberate procedures are as boring as always. So we need new actors, we need new collaborators, and that is why the role of the artistic activist is so crucial. So here are a couple of examples of artists working with and within the welfare state that have inspired Steve and I.
Traffic mimes. Antanas Makas, a philosophy professor, was elected as mayor of Bogota in the mid-1990s. The city of Bogota in Colombia had many, many problems, and one of the problems was a high level of traffic fatalities. Quite simply, drivers paid no attention to pedestrians, pedestrians paid no attention to drivers, and traffic police were notoriously corrupt. So what Makas did was very creative. The first thing he did is he fired all of the corrupt traffic officers. But then what he did, realizing that people feared ridicule much more than they feared traffic fines, was he hired 420 traffic mimes to direct traffic. The amazing thing is it worked. Within 5 years, traffic fatalities dropped by 50% in Bogota, Colombia. And it was so successful that it was actually exported to Caracas and Venezuela and other cities in Latin America as well. Street crossing performance art. In the United States, in the Midwestern city of Milwaukee, performance artist Ann Basting got a gig working at an old age home to do storytelling with old people. She soon realized this didn't work. Many old people are suffering from senility and Alzheimer's, and quite simply, they couldn't remember stories to tell them. But what they were very good at, she discovered, was improv theater. And so she created a theater troupe. And with this theater troupe, she worked on the problems which faced old people in the city like Milwaukee. And one of the problems that old people faced is traffic lights are not timed for old people. They're timed for young people to get across and the able-bodied to get across. And so what she did is she brought her new theater troupe of very old people out onto the streets and in front of city officials, including the mayor of Milwaukee, had them stage sort of slow walks through traffic intersections. And again, it was effective. The Milwaukee city government changed the traffic timing and thereby changing policy.
A contracted love affair or junkies safely in the bunker. So if Antanamukus was an example of the kind of partnerships that we're talking about from the top down, then I guess Ann Basting was an example of the same thing from the bottom up. So here's an example of a contracted kind. Kenneth Belfeldt is a Danish-based artist who used citizen involvement to come up with creative solutions to issues facing typically marginalized groups who often gets forgotten in urban development plans. So he has, for example, in collaboration with junkies and nurses, designed and created open and safe injection rooms for addicts in the old war bunkers underneath and around Copenhagen, for the protection of users and citizens alike. The project was highly controversial, and it also served as a concrete point of departure for the very heated debate that it triggered in Denmark at the time. A couple of years ago, the project actually ended because the government in place decided to introduce drug user rooms in cities around Denmark. Belfeldt's work also led the municipality of Copenhagen to choose him and his team to restore Fredens Park in Nørrebro, København, which is a key city square for politicians, the media, and also political and social outcasts alike. Now, this is an ingenious project in itself. You'll have to look it up. But in this context, what's noteworthy to mention here is that in the arrangement, in the wording in the actual contract with the municipality, the word love, for the first time in the history of Danish contracting in these kind of projects, was mentioned and key in such a public contract, as we can see up here. Now, had the municipality contracted I'm wondering if this fly is a very new version of the drone that we saw in the beginning. And if it is, I'm wondering who's watching.
It's the state.
Right. So, if they've contracted an architect, they would have gotten a pre-designed plan. If they have contracted an anthropologist, they would have received a report. With Belfeldt, they received something more.
So none of this is to gloss over the real problems with this sort of collaboration between artists and the services of the welfare state. We're just going to bring up two, but we could talk about more as well. In learning to speak the language of the state, do we risk losing the power of the unspeakable? That is, the power of art. Or in privileging artistic expression and affect, do we risk producing less than efficient social services or undermine the welfare state by letting its core services be provided by artistic amateurs?
But we believe that it is worth the risk. I mean, there is a risk here. But it's worth it because it can reinvigorate our lust for facts and clarify that there is no ultimate truth. Through co-creative campaigns with the state, the power of imagination is set free and given a direction.
But, and this is an important but, it needs to be real collaboration between arts and politics, working together, not as we often see it, not as politics as a mere subject matter for art.
Political expressionism, for example.
Or art as decoration for the state.
Window dressing, I'd call it. Right?
But instead, real cooperation between artists and the state. For example, since 1977, the artist Myril Lederman Ukeles has been working with the sanitation department of New York City, doing countless projects, one of which is this, to draw attention to the human connections that underlie state functions like garbage removal.
Real cooperation between arts and politics is in accordance with what James E. Scott calls anarchism as praxis. And in doing so, it is crucial for the integrity of the creative activist that its artistic discursive autonomy is maintained in an open interplay with mainstream politics. Belfeld, as we saw before, was shrewdly aware of this, and he got it in writing in the contract. This tendency of making art that works is a great political opportunity in the history of progressive politics to test new ideas and to stimulate social innovation.
And even if it is risky, the world is in too dire straits not to take a leap of faith and try. Whether it's local municipalities' inclusion of citizens, social enterprises, or traditional civil society organizations seeking new partnerships, artistic activists have the social capital and creative toolbox necessary to open up new territory, build new alliances, create new languages, establish new perspectives, open up new visions, and constructively challenge and improve experimental approaches, to tell the truth and reveal the facts, but in ways that excite and engage and sometimes enrage people.
But no longer should she do it alone. For centuries, we've imagined the artist as the lone individual, isolated in the garret, refusing to engage with society as such. But we say no longer.
Ibsen ends his play, Enemy of the People, with Dr. Stockman, the truth-telling protagonist, proclaiming,
Saken den, forstår dere, at den sterkeste mannen I verden, det han som står mest alene.
I've made a great discovery. The thing is, you see, that the strongest man in the world is the man who stands alone.
That's it. We
think
not. Thank you.